Hey, Brandy here, the quilter on fire. And it's Tuesday. You know what that means? Or maybe you don't know what that means, but you will now because it's Textile Art Tips Tuesday, or Tuesday Art Tips Textile. I don't know what I'm going to call it. Before we get started, you can find these tips on the Quilter on Fire YouTube channel. It's the playlist Textile Art Tips. So go subscribe and click that bell so you get notified every time I post a new video. So let's get started with today's project. Today's tip is about making your own fabric. I have a pile of black and white fabrics here that I love and use all the time, but there's one piece that I have barely any left of, and I want to make some more. And in fact, I want to make it a little different than this. I want to make the triangles a little bit bigger and have the black in the background. So I could do a couple of things. I could use white fabric or black fabric. I could stamp little white triangles all over fabric, but today I'm going to try to do a resist technique. So I'm going to use a white fabric, put triangles all over it, and then paint it black. So let's get started. Here are a few of the things you'll need. Some inspiration fabric, all the fabrics you're choosing from so you can decide what kind of design you're going to do. You'll need a white piece of fabric, pretty wrinkly, I'll press that. Some spray if you want to press it. So I use flatter, and there's all kinds of sprays you can get on the market, but I love flatter. And then you'll need some paints, of course. You can use acrylic paint, fabric paint, screen printing ink. There's all kinds of options. And you'll also need a paintbrush. You'll also need some scissors that you can use on paper, some tape, some painter's tape. This is my actual inspiration fabric that I'm going to be emulating. And then here is just some simple, you would call them shipping labels, I guess. So simple shipping labels that we're going to be cutting up into triangles. And of course, you might want an iron if you're going to be pressing your fabric, and something to protect your workspace. So I've got a nice little, tarp here that I'm going to be using. So those are the supplies you'll need. You might also want some kind of stylus, or you could use this to hold your little triangles down when you're painting around them. But that's about it. Pretty simple supplies, and you're ready to go. So before we paint on fabric, we want it to be washed, which this one is, but we also want to press it nice and flat. So you can use water or some kind of spray that you love and spritz it down. Just get it nice and softly wet a little bit, and then we're going to press it nice and smooth. Now we have a really nice canvas to paint on. Okay, so I have my table protected. I have my fabric down. I'm simply going to tape it to keep it secure. So there is fabric paint, there is acrylic paint, and then there is screen printing ink. There's all kinds of things you can do. You want to make sure that they're water-based and they're good for fabric. So the only one of these three that's not great for fabric is the acrylic paint. So if you're going to use this because you have a big stash of acrylic paints, then you would want to maybe add a fabric medium to that. But today I'm going to use screen printing ink because that's my favorite. So let's get started with the inspiration for the design, and then we'll go into how I'm going to cut these up to make triangles to go on my fabric. So I love this fabric, and I want to paint the fabric black with the white triangle resists. So the shipping label is going to be my resist. So let me show you how I'm going to draw some lines on here so that I can cut up each of these 6 labels into some sort of equal sized triangles. So I'm simply going to make them in half. So I've done like a T, and then I'm going to put an X in each one. Simple as that. Anyone can do this technique. So now what I've done is I've made a whole bunch of triangles that I can simply cut out with my fabric scissors, and then I can lay them out on my fabric. So let's get started. Now that I've got them all drawn out, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut. Okay, I haven't even cut them all out, but I think that might be enough. So I'm going to set this aside, use it for a different project, and I'm going to get started placing them on my art piece. This one has a tip cut off, so I might set it aside and not use it. Okay, now this is looking pretty good. I can decide that, okay, I kind of want it to go that far across and then leave the rest black. That could be really cool. Or I could continue to put triangles across the whole piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this all black and I'm going to leave this fully black so it kind of looks like a cool effect. Okay, so let's get started with the painting. It's great to have a plate handy for your paintbrush, and we want to get our paints ready. Before we actually dip into this giant thing of paint, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that all of these are pressed down really well. You can also use a stylus or the back of another paintbrush to hold down the corners as you're painting around them. And that's what I'll do. I might even use the lid a little bit to get some of the painting done. So I'm just going to start painting on fabric. So you can see what I do is I paint off the ends, off the edges of the labels there. So I'm painting from the label onto the fabric. So I'm just making black fabric. I'm going to use the stuff on this lid. I'm just using the edge of that label to keep a nice crisp edge. And you know, I'm not too worried if it goes underneath a bit. I don't want too many lumpy glumps on my fabric. I want it to be less is more. You can always add a little more later if you want to. But you can see I'm going off the label onto the fabric. I'm not painting against the label because I don't want those little edges to lift up. Now that I'm done all the triangles, I'm just going to paint to the edge of the fabric. So I'm going to try not to make it too thick over here. I'm going to do a bit of a wash and just keep going over it until it's kind of filled in. You could even make this kind of more, you know, a little bit less paint there, but I'm going to make it completely black, so it's kind of like a black fabric. But you can see that it's going to get a little bit baggy here. That's okay. We're going to press this after. Once it's all dry, we'll press it with a nice cloth and it'll be perfect. Now I'm going to go over and I'm going to just try to make sure there's no clumps on the fabric part. It's hard to tell sometimes, but if you see any big shiny clumps, you want to get rid of those because they're kind of hard to stitch through. If there's clumps on the labels, that's okay, but you don't really want big clumps on your fabric. So I'm going to try to get rid of those. Okay, now for the fun part. This is where your stylus comes in really handy. You're going to lift the edge of that label and grab it and pull. I'm going to be getting this all over my fingers. I'm okay with that. If you don't like it, you can put some gloves on. And it's okay if it's not perfect. You're having fun. You're making fabric. As far as I'm concerned, there's no better hobby on earth. So as long as you're having fun, you're doing the right thing. Look how cool this is. Okay, let me stop here and show you. This one's actually sticking down quite a bit because the moisture has gotten through the label. So this is why I'm peeling them off immediately when they're still wet, because if you let them dry, the moisture will sink in, they'll be really hard to get off. So that corner didn't really work, so I'm going to do another corner and try to peel that off, and great, it all came off. But you want to get these off while they're still wet and the paint is still wet so that you can, you know, kind of peel them off before they really adhere too well. They get kind of soggy because they're just office labels. They're not any kind of fancy textile art product. They're not meant really to be working with paint, but I'm having some fun with it. So there you have it. We've used plain white fabric that's washed and pressed, ready to go. We have cut up labels and put them all over the front, and then we've painted with screen printing ink. You can also use acrylic with fabric medium or fabric paint. So here is the original fabric that inspired this new fabric. All that's left to do now is to allow this to dry for 24 hours. Use a pressing cloth before you press it, but press it well to set the paint and you're good to go. You can use it in your project. So, boom! That was my textile art tip for today. This fabric here inspired me to make a brand new fabric of my own with simple paint on fabric with labels as a resist. It's a simple technique and I hope you'll give it a try. While you're here, please subscribe. I'd be so grateful, and leave me a comment right now. Are you going to try this technique? Let me know how it goes, or tell me which textile art technique that you want me to show you next. Get busy in your studio with the Quilter on Fire. See you next time for some more creative fire.